Today is Monday, August 2nd, and this is Tokyo Daily, the Olympic show from the Toronto Star. I'm your host, Brendan Dunlop. Mark it in your calendars. August 2nd, 2021 will be remembered as one of the most historic days in Canadian soccer history. The day Christine Sinclair and Canada booked their place in an Olympic gold medal match by beating the United States for the first time in 20 years. 20 years. That semifinal win snapped a 36-game winless streak against the Americans that ran all the way back to 2001. And it was only the fourth win over the United States in 64 matches. You thought this rivalry was intense because of 2012? It's been intense for a long time, and 2012 just made it all the more special for what we saw early this morning. If you woke up for it, you were rewarded with a historic moment. Now, if you were sick of hearing about 2012 over and over and over again, imagine how Christine Sinclair and these women felt. And the outpouring of tweets from retired players that were a part of that heartbreak shows just how much it meant to watch these Canadian women reach the gold medal game for the very first time. And what a way to do it. I'll break it all down and talk about Jessie Fleming's match-winning penalty with Laura Armstrong in just a minute. The Canadian women's basketball team had medal hopes, but their time in Tokyo is done. With a win and 2 losses in the group stage, Canada was scoreboard watching on Monday, needing a couple of scenarios to go their way in order to advance as one of the best third-place teams in the women's basketball tournament. Australia's 27-point win over Puerto Rico means that Canada's time is done. Canada didn't do enough. Their bags are packed. They arrived in Tokyo as the 4th-ranked team, but Canada's stars didn't shine, so it's back to the drawing board for Canada basketball. And an incredible feat from the track. Did you see this? In the women's 1500-meter, world champion Sifan Hassan of the Netherlands was tripped up in her heat in a collision near the back of the field. She got up and won the 15-meter heat. Andre de Grasse will be back on the track. You can watch the Canadian tonight in the 200 meters as that begins. The heats do begin tonight. The final will go on Wednesday in Japan. We will see Simone Biles at these games on Tuesday in Japan. She will participate in the beam final after withdrawing from the more acrobatic events this week to focus on her mental well-being. She won bronze on the beam in Rio, and she'll look to add to her 6 Olympic medals. Canada's medal count didn't change overnight, but it will, thanks to the women's soccer team. In 2012, Canada lost the semifinal they deserved to win. In Japan, they won a semifinal that maybe they wouldn't have if not for a penalty call that probably wasn't a penalty. Joining me now to talk about that historic win, none other than the Toronto Star's Laura Armstrong. Laura, VAR wasn't a thing in London, but thank goodness for Canadian soccer, it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Canadians are thinking, wow, we could have used VAR, 9 years ago. But I mean, certainly it worked for the Canadians in their favor this time around. It's something that we're going to talk about. It's a penalty call that I think, on some days might not have been called by some referees, might not have been called, but at this point, in this game it was. And I certainly think that that's not really the story here. I think the story here is the fact that Canada was in it long enough that when they had that one chance, they converted it, and it was the game changer. And just the fact that the United States, let it get to that point where Canada needed just one chance, really, because they only had 2 shots on net, I believe, in the whole game, to convert. So, and to completely take the results and send them to the gold medal game. So, I mean, I think, penalties are always talking points. VAR in general has been very good in this tournament, and I think that the Canadians will be happy that happened. Full credit to Deanne Rose because she pushed for that penalty and she got it, and it's what sent Canada into their first gold medal game, and that's incredibly exciting. I know Christine Sinclair said after the game that she was happy to get a little bit of a revenge, and I certainly think that for her and for Desiree Scott and for Sophie Schmidt and for Erin McLeod, the 4 players on the current roster who were there in 2012, you really felt like they deserve that to an extent after that 2012 semifinal match that saw them lose in heartbreaking fashion. But I think that one thing that the Canadians did really, really well is they didn't let the emotion overwhelm them. They didn't let it become too big to get, sort of up in that kind of thinking about revenge. They just played their game, and that's what got them the result.
They really held strong in those final 15 minutes after taking the lead, and you touched on so many great points. The emotion, obviously, being a big one for any Canadian who watched Karina LeBlanc post game, and to see her hold back the tears. And we knew that she spoke about the tears of joy that were there when the final whistle blew. It's just an incredible moment for Canadian soccer on so many levels. But for Christine Sinclair and this team that's very much, had been built around her or built in her image, he's such an icon for the Canadian game, and not just the Canadian game, but for women's soccer as a whole. You can tell it as a collective. There was a two split fold goal here. It was, yes, change the color of the medal, avenge 2012, but it was win it for Christine. And she wasn't on the pitch for the final whistle, but absolutely this team is united in going for gold for her.
Yeah, no, she wasn't on the pitch for the final whistle, but she gave everything she got. You watched her limp off that field. We're still not entirely sure what that was, potentially suffering from a knock from the game against Chile earlier in the year. I think that you'd have to, sort of tape Christine Sinclair down to the bench to keep her from playing in a gold medal game. So I'm sure that we will see her later in the week. But certainly, you watch Christine Sinclair and she gives her whole body to the game. She puts everything in. I had somebody compare her to Kyle Lowry earlier today, and I think that's very much they're very much of a similar vein, right? They're players who give their all, everything they can for the team. And you watched her at the end of the game. She had, a big long hug with Sophie Schmidt. She had a big long hug with Desiree Scott. And then she went and she sat down, right? She was exhausted. And that's what it takes to beat the Americans. And I think that Christine Sinclair sets the example for that team every time out. And that's what makes the team want to win for her.
I think every player on the pitch was exhausted. In the first half, you could see, I expected this game to feel like a final. And there were some sloppy mistakes, and they were trying to find their feet and not give away too much. And really, the first half was quite boring. I think a lot of Canadians that would have woken up early for that would have regretted having been awake at 4 o'clock. Happy to have been awake at 6 o'clock, but at 4 o'clock, they perhaps could have gone without. But the heat, it was the index said that it was 32 with the Humidex. It certainly looked a lot hotter out there. So I think that played a big factor as well. Neither of these teams wanted to go beyond 90 minutes, and thankfully for the Canadians, they didn't have to.
Yeah, and it's going to be an even more interesting dynamic with the Heat later this week, because I believe the final match is played during the day. So that's going to be something that, it's going to be a morning match. So that's going to be something that the Canadians are going to have to contend with. That being said, the other team's going to have to face it too. So we'll see how it goes, but it was definitely a day to remember. That's for sure.
Were you surprised that the U.S. struggled to get any momentum? In the second half, they certainly looked a bit more themselves, and the luxury, talk about like a Man City style luxury of looking down the bench and being able to pull on Megan Rapinoe and Kristen Press and Carly Lloyd at the exact same time. They started to look more of a threat, but they never really were threatening.
No, they weren't. And I've watched this American team throughout the tournament, and they haven't looked like themselves. They haven't looked cohesive. They really haven't had the sort of multi-pronged attack that they're known for, right? And I certainly thought that going into this game that the Americans were going to win. I thought the Americans were going to win in 90 minutes. I told you that last night. But I thought that because of the wealth of talent that this team has, and what they normally do in tournaments is they don't always start out very strong, but they tend to grow into matches. And I really expected that, given the fact that they were playing against a North American rival that they knew that they could beat, and they had a long history of beating, I really thought that they were going to sort of find their footing today, and they didn't. They gave up so many turnovers. They missed so many passes. You're looking for passes and players just aren't there. And then the attack was just incredibly one-dimensional. And yes, certainly in the second half, I think they had 3 shots on target over 11 chances, which was much more significant than 0 shots on target over 2 chances in the first half. But they never really, but for sort of a 5-minute period, they never really created a lot. So it's definitely a different United States team. Megan Rapinoe sort of took the blame after the game. She said that it was on the players, and the players need to be better. But one thing that I do think is really great about this game is that Alyssa Naylor went down early in this game. I think that it could have been easily sort of a crutch for the United States after the game, and said, if we had had Alyssa Naylor in net, maybe we would have won that game. I don't think that's true because Jessie Fleming put in the perfect penalty. And I think, Canadian fans have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder about penalties recently, but Jessie Fleming should be Canada's new penalty taker because that was perfect. No goalie was going to save that, whether it was Alyssa Naylor or Adrienne French. So altogether, Canada entirely deserves it.
It looked like Christine Sinclair was going to take that shot. She picked up the ball first, and the camera setup seemed to make it look like Sinclair was going to shoot, and then she handed the ball to Jessie Fleming. Right decision. Maybe she knew what was coming. She didn't want to shoot against her old teammate either, or her current teammate, her Portland teammate in French.
I think that there's probably multiple aspects to that decision, right? There's the playing against her Portland teammate who probably knows what it's like to see Christine Sinclair score a penalty. She takes them for Portland sort of semi-regularly at least. 2, Christine Sinclair just missed a penalty in the penalty shootout. Maybe she's not feeling great. 3, Christine Sinclair looked like she's hurting a little bit, so maybe now is not the time to be taking a penalty. Jessie Fleming just took a great penalty in the penalty shootout. And also, when Christine Sinclair tells you to take a penalty and you have the faith of Christine Sinclair, I think you walk up to the penalty spot feeling pretty darn good about yourself. And frankly, Jessie Fleming looked like she had all the confidence in the world with that shot.
Yes, she did. I'm very excited to see how they come out in this gold medal match. For the United States, though, going into this bronze medal game, I think it's going to be so hard for them to get up for that. They came to this tournament with one goal in mind, and that was being in the gold medal match. Think about how Canada put that behind them at 2012 to come out as strong as they did and win the bronze medal in London. I don't think that the United States will be able to find that gear.
It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, one thing that we have to remember is that the United States didn't finish on the podium in 2016 either, right? So they know what it's like to go home without a medal. So I think that what you have to do is you have to tap into those feelings and you have to say, listen, a bronze might not be what we wanted, but it's better than nothing. We'd much rather stand on the podium than finish 4th, which I think is the worst place to finish, frankly, at the Olympics. So I think that they're going to have to sort of reshape their mentality a little bit and try and get something back here, because frankly, I think that they've lost a lot of confidence from their fans and from, maybe even a little bit of confidence in themselves over the course of this tournament. And I think that, if they want to, it's important for this team to finish on a strong foot. And they're going to need to find that mentality. The U.S. is certainly not a team that's used to losing. But as the women's game grows, it's something that they're probably going to have to get used to doing a little bit more often. And how they transition in this next sort of period in terms of the global game, I think is going to be really important to how relevant they stay. I mean, they're always going to be a great team, but are they always going to be the great team? That's the big question going forward.
Hey, as someone who's covered the women's game for as long as you have and as closely as you have, what was it like for you to see the reaction of, a larger portion of the Canadian soccer-loving community, male and female, be so active and so involved in the wee hours of the morning and into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that today and even maybe the last game, I mean, in the preparation for this game, you start to see not just, your typical soccer fans, you start to see everybody in the country get on the bandwagon. So it's always important for me to see the Canadian soccer community out there. But frankly, the Canadian soccer community is always out there. Like, they're a very dedicated bunch of fans. And I knew that they were going to wake up at 4:00 in the morning to watch this game, no matter who it was against. It's the fact that other people are now paying attention when that, it's become big, right? And that's great to see. And I hope that, just like in 2012, I hope that, going to this gold medal game has more of sort of the general population of sports fans paying attention to soccer, Canadian soccer in general. It's a really exciting time, both for the men's and women's side. And it makes the sort of bandwagon of daily soccer fans grow. I think that that's what we can hope for, and I'm sure that's what we'll see.
Canadian women flying the flag in Tokyo, and certainly the Canadian women flying the flag for Canadian soccer, much like you, Laura. So thanks for coming on Tokyo Daily to talk about it with me.
Thanks for having me.
In reaching the final, Canada joins the United States and Germany as the only nations to have medaled in 3 straight Olympic soccer tournaments. Pretty incredible. And they will play Sweden in Thursday's final. Thursday for us. 1 goal was enough for the reigning Olympic silver medalist, Sweden, to dump Australia in the other semifinal played in Yokohama. As Laura said, it's going to be a Friday morning kickoff in Japan, so that's going to play a factor. But 10 p.m. Thursday for us, that's the important part. This is such a special time for Canadian soccer, so tune in. support these incredible Canadian women, and show the TV executives that big games belong on TV. I'm glad you're watching Tokyo Daily on YouTube, or listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Been great to talk to you every day during Tokyo 2020. I'll talk to you tomorrow.